Whereas school libraries are an integral part to a quality educational program, and whereas school libraries provide equitable access to information such as books, digital resources to expand literacy and inquiry within and beyond the school, and whereas library media specialists play a vital role in the teaching and learning process through their work with both students and other teachers, and whereas school libraries provide learning activities designed to enhance reading motivation, promote competencies in new and developing technologies, and establish the information literacy skills necessary for lifelong learning, therefore, be it resolved that I, Carolyn Stanford Taylor, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, declare April as School Library Month.
All right.
Live stream isn't up.
Okay. Just a comment that the YouTube live stream does not seem to be running right now. Is that something that we can fix? Sure. Okay. Okay. So we will continue with the next proclamation. We have a third proclamation tonight, and that is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. And Jane Roosh, if you would be willing to read that proclamation, please.
Okay, thank you. Whereas autism spectrum disorder is a complex developmental disability that typically appears during early childhood as a result of neurological disorder that affects the brain, and whereas autism spectrum disorder affects how individuals interact with others, communicate, self-regulate, and learn, and impacts as many as 1 in 59 children. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and whereas autism spectrum disorder has a wide-ranging implications for the entire family of the diagnosed individual, and early diagnosis research, professional training, education, and therapies are vital to ensure each individual can lead a life filled with opportunity, and whereas autism spectrum disorder affects a person throughout their lifespan, and their quality of life depends not only on the foundation provided in childhood, but also on ongoing support that are specific to their educational, medical, social, recreational, family, and employment needs. Whereas this Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, the state of Wisconsin joins individuals with autism and autism advocates across the state in celebrating the accomplishments of individuals with autism and raising awareness about the disorder, so as to foster acceptance and create more welcoming and inclusive communities for all people. Now, therefore, I, Tony Evers, Governor of the state of Wisconsin, do hereby proclaim April 2021 as Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month.
All right, thank you. So before we move to public comment, we do have recognition of an employee of the district. And so we will move on to agenda item number 8, the resolution of commendation for Patricia Zumke. The resolution of commendation committee recommends the following individuals for recognition. Patricia Zumke. Patricia, or Patty Zumke, is a health education teacher at both John Muir and Horace Mann Middle Schools, and was nominated for the resolution of commendation by John Muir Middle School Principal Patrick Galligan. Patty has received a 2021 Cole Teacher Fellowship through the Cole Foundation. She was chosen for this grant from among many fine candidates because of her skill as a leader and an agent for positive change, and her superior ability to inspire love of learning. John Muir Middle School Principal Patrick Galligan states, Patty continually works both in her classroom with student activities and in her free time away from school to help make a positive impact on the personal health of individuals in our community. Patty is also dedicated to increasing opportunities for individuals who sometimes have not always had their voices heard, and has made a tremendously positive impact in our schools and the Wausau community overall. So at this time, will we be asking Ms. Zumke forward?
We have to have the board take the vote first.
Okay.
And then we would have Patty come forward.
Okay, so we have the formality. So I am seeking a motion to approve Patricia Zumke to receive the resolution of commendation. Okay, that was a first by Lee Webster, a second by Jeff Lee. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Let's call down Ms. Zumke.
And I wonder if Mr. Galligan might want to come and
Yes,
see he's
absolutely. Mr. Galligan, if you're here. Sure.
here. And Cassie has the plaque.
Okay.
You could go right over here.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry, Catherine. Do not fall.
Got me too.
Yeah, if you want to read, go ahead.
Sure, will do. All right. Can I? Yeah, congratulations.
I would say good one, but
Gotcha, yeah.
that's done.
All right, so congratulations, Patty, and thank you for the nomination, Pat. I'll just read the plaque. It says, whereas the Board of Education of the Wausau School District encourages employees, students, and patrons to participate in activities which will bring honor and esteem to themselves and to the Wausau School District, and whereas Patricia Zumke, health education teacher at John Muir Middle School, is the recipient of the 2021 Herb Pohl Educational Foundation Teacher Fellowship, and whereas the Board of Education deems that this accomplishment is meritorious and worthy of praise and commendation, therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education of the Wausau School District to publicly recognize said action and render it permanently to its minutes to be preserved for public posterity on this day, the 12th of April, 2021. Here we go. Congratulations. Yeah, let's turn it this way. Sorry. Here we go. Right here, I think. All right. Thank you. Congratulations. And I think we have one more.
Yeah, we have one more item here. It's the next item on the agenda, and it's the Medical College of Wisconsin Teaching Pin Award. So
Interesting.
there's a member of the Medical College of Wisconsin who will present this pin.
Yep. Evening.
There we go. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Dodson. I have the privilege of being the Dean of the Medical College of Wisconsin, Central Wisconsin campus here in Wausau. We are a regional campus of the Medical College, which has been in Milwaukee for 130 years. We are here as a community resource and to help ensure that the northern part of Wisconsin continues to have excellent medical care available into the future. To do that, you may be wondering why I am here talking about a middle school teacher. We aspire to be the most community engaged campus in the country at our campus here in Wausau. Patty has been an integral part of that. She has guided our students through projects that will have long-lasting impact in the community. She is inspiring young people to consider healthcare careers and hopefully become our students one of these days. And we are very, very grateful for her efforts. It is unusual for MCW or any medical institution to award teaching pins to non-physicians or to non-PhD educators. So this is a somewhat unusual award, but I am thrilled to be able to offer that due to the incredible efforts that Patty has made on behalf of our students and the entire community.
So yes, thank you to Patty. She has been working with our students, doing what we call core sessions, teaching students about teen mental health, helping to coach our students as far as listening to them about their project ideas. She has mentored 3 of our students through a 2-year project process. And she also works with our medical students on the PATCH program. She has even volunteered herself and her children to do practice examinations. So Patty's been all in. And so again, we thank you very much for engaging with our medical students and engaging with us as a faculty.
We offer her a considerably smaller but more portable token of our appreciation, a teaching pin from MCW. Thank you, Patty.
Here. Go ahead. All right, thank you. Congratulations, Patty. Thanks, Patrick. Yep.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is public and student comment. Board members, I am just looking at the number of comments here, and typically, well, per policy, we can limit it to 30 minutes unless the board agrees to extend. And public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person, but if the individuals all use their 3 minutes, we will go over 30 minutes, and I just want to verify it's okay with the board that we extend public comment today. Okay, I'm not hearing any objection. So I do want to just review the public comment policy. And the first individual will be Bruce Grau, but where is the policy here? There we go. So public comment is at this microphone, and public comment is limited to anyone having a legitimate interest in the actions of the board. You may comment during this period. The participant must be recognized by the presiding officer and will be requested to preface their comments by announcement of their name, address, and or group affiliation if or when appropriate. Statements are limited to no more than 3 minutes. I'm sorry, that is a strict 3 minutes. And speakers shall direct all comments to the board, not to staff or other participants. Public comments identifying specific personnel or students by name are not appropriate subjects for presentation to the board and shall be referred to the superintendent's office. Speakers bear the personal risk if anything they say during the public comment period is defamatory, slanderous, or otherwise harmful to another individual. The presiding officer values civil discourse and may interrupt, terminate, or prohibit comments that do not adhere to the rules. I'm just going to ask that everybody maintain decorum through this time and through the entire meeting. And what I'll do, just so everybody has a heads up, is I'll let you know if you are on deck so you can be prepared. So our first comment will be Bruce Grau, followed by Jack Hogendijk, followed by Eric T. So just the first person can come up, but then you know you're on deck. So Mr. Grau, again, if you'll just state your name and address for the record. Clerk Peck will show signs of 30 seconds left in time, and again, it is a strict 3 minutes. You may begin.
I'm Bruce Grau, 1115 North 10th Street, Wausau. Whoa. Hope that doesn't count for my 3 minutes. This could take 3 minutes to fix it. I could do this. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Wausau, I'm a member of the Poor People's Campaign in Wausau. And the achievement gap in our schools proved a highlight of the recent election. But how is formal recognition of the struggles of LGBTQ, Asian, Native American, and Islanders, Indigenous women, members of marginalized students and families critical to shrinking the growing achievement gap in Wausau schools? From a visual perspective, such a gap closes best from the bottom up. To lower the top or to totally write off the bottom would be egregious. In the Poor People's Campaign, we say that when the bottom is lifted, everyone rises. Parents in the 2018 survey felt our schools are doing worse with programming for struggling students at risk for dropping out. This describes the reality of marginalized students. What life challenges of marginalized groups need to be addressed? Number one, poverty. Wausau's poverty rate exceeds the state's by 50%, and all racial groups, their rates surpass Milwaukee's. Asians suffer a rate of 33.6%, Native Americans 36.9%, and national figures for the LGBTQ community reveals a 6% higher rate than for cisgender males, but up to 70% for transgender people. The deleterious effects of poverty and unstable living situations on school performance is very well documented. Number two, vastly low participation of marginalized groups in engagement with the dominant system. Parental involvement in the full spectrum of activities impacting their children's education plays a pivotal role in academic success. Yet, major policy decisions are made without obtaining input from marginalized groups, such as with the recent school board effort to close Lincoln and Grant schools. How can policy be decided with a 4 to 7% engagement rate? Number three, communication disconnect. Parents and influential elders in the family of many marginalized groups hold to their native tongue when communicating. We have predominantly Hmong and Spanish primary speakers. The Hmong language is orally based. Yet, how many school board meetings or public communications are provided orally in Hmong or Spanish? Broadband connectivity has been frustratingly spotty as well. You have before you tonight these resolutions that you can take a significant step. They're a declaration of a deliberate intent to check and reverse these growing imbalances. You hold a valued position in our society from which to poignantly advocate for systemic changes that support this effort by calling for livable wages, affordable housing, expanding medical access. I'm just going to wrap up in 2 sentences. Can I do that? Okay. Well, you can take a significant step in that direction tonight. Thank you.
Next will be Jack Hogendijk, and just to keep in mind who's on deck will be Eric T., followed by Christine Salm.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is Jack Hogendijk. I live at 4508 Hilltop Road in Wausau, and I'm representing myself. A couple of months ago, the City Pages ran an article about the $4 million referendum that was on the ballot and which passed, ostensibly for hiring counselors and social workers in our schools. They laid out what the problems are in our school and what is needed to attempt to address the problem. They then asked an important question: why? Why are so many students suffering from depression, acting out, or saying they don't feel safe? The article suggested several possible answers. Sarah Gardner, a Wausau school psychologist who was interviewed for the story, pointed out a key issue in the Wausau School District. Gardner pointed out the number of children not in two-parent married households has declined. That leads to children navigating two different expectations and differing lifestyles that can put additional stress on children. Andy Graham, a Wausau school counselor who was also interviewed for the story, said this, quote, "There has been a paradigm shift between traditional family modalities and modern approaches which are leading to greater expectations on school staff to fill the roles that were once filled by parents. More and more, the school system is becoming the parent. We need to teach those values, those character traits, those leadership skills. 2 years ago, the district convened a mandatory human growth and development curriculum committee. The committee was made up of parents, teachers, administrators, students, clergy, and medical professionals. Their role was to make recommendations for modifications or additions to the curriculum. During the discussions, one of the members reminded the committee that state statute requires certain subject matter to be taught in the human growth and development program, including, quote, instruction in parental responsibility and the socio and economic benefits of marriage for adults and their children. There's plenty of data to bear out the much improved outcomes for children growing up in two-parent families. Things like unemployment, dropout rates, incarceration, drug abuse, all are much better in intact families. Recent data show that only 5% of children under the age of 18 living in married couple families in Wisconsin were living in poverty, while 38% of children under 18 living in single-parent households were in poverty. Teaching about the benefits of marriage is required by state statute, yet the committee voted not to teach that valuable information, and one of the teachers at the meeting flatly refused, saying, quote, I'm not going to teach that. I do not want to make all those children from single-parent homes feel guilty. Committee members were reminded that the mandate is not to tell kids they should get married, only that marriage is a great option, worth considering, and that the data bear that out. So my question is this, Madam President. Why are we not teaching our students about the benefits of marriage when there is a wealth of data to support it as a preferable option and state statute requires it? And don't you think we would see fewer children struggling emotionally and psychologically if we did? Thank you, Madam President.
Eric T., followed by Christine Salm, followed by Will Harris. Eric. Oh, okay. Just a reminder that comment is 3 minutes, and Clerk Peck will show 30 seconds and time. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name's Eric. Address is 1119 Brown Street. I'm here tonight representing myself, but I want to speak on behalf of all vulnerable people in our state. I think there's quite a bit of a understatement in our common dialogue with our neighbors, with our friends, with our employers. We tend to think that there isn't a problem. There is. We have quite a bit of privilege in this nation if we're white, if we're male, if we're Christian. And that needs to be addressed. And that starts at the school level. And that all populations should feel safe and protected and lifted, understood and cared for. And any institution that refuses to acknowledge that is not working in good faith. And one last comment, I would beware of the creeping religious zealotry into our state systems. There is a separation of church and state still in this country. Thank you.
Which will be Christine Salm, followed by Will Harris, followed by Rita Pockel.
To wear your masks at all times when you're in the Wausau School District buildings.
Oh, thanks for addressing that, Jane. Yes, the Wausau School District did adopt a policy last August as it relates to mask wearing. That policy is still in place, so please continue to wear your masks during this meeting. All right, Ms. Salm, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Christine Salm, 11th Street, Wausau, Wisconsin. I'd like to express my support for the 3 resolutions that will be presented tonight. During the recent school board elections, concerns were raised about anti-LGBTQ sentiments held by a current school board member and the candidates he endorsed in that election. When directly confronted about the issue by a constituent, one of the candidates did express her support for LGBTQ students. I was relieved to hear that. Here are why these resolutions are important and why people have come tonight to speak up and express their concerns. The school district, a school district who is committed to providing inclusive curriculum, fosters kindness and teaches children to respect differences. All school districts should have non-discrimination and harassment policies in place that cover race and gender identity, but policies alone are not enough. Districts must also address bullying and harassment with researched based interventions. Research shows that the most effective way to reduce bullying is to create a school-wide culture of inclusion and respect for difference. It is my expectation that teaching modalities will continue to promote and encourage an inclusive learning environment. It is imperative that public education encompasses the culture of the community in its entirety and provide curriculum that does not exclude marginalized groups based on an ideology held by one group. Our children encounter people with different beliefs when they join any community. While one aim for learning about diversity is to become more accepting of those around us, not everyone is going to be best friends. That does not mean they can't get along and learn together. The purpose of learning about cultural and gender diversity is to demonstrate that all children are unique. It also teaches children to live and work with others and to treat everyone with kindness and respect. If you truly care about providing a safe learning environment for our children, and you care about the mental health of kids, supporting this resolution should be an easy choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have Will Harris, followed by Rita Pockel, followed by Lisa Ort-Sondergaard.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is William Harris. I'm the Marathon County Board Supervisor for District 3. My address is 316 1/2 North 3rd Street, Apartment C, Wausau, Wisconsin, 54403. Thank you, School Board, for allowing me to speak today. I want to say, as a community, I've always believed that we are stronger when we move forward together and when we are a community that is welcoming and inclusive. Our young people today face so many challenges, yet remain optimistic, resilient beacons of hope for us all. From the pandemic to social pressures and many balancing school, extracurricular activities, part-time jobs, internships, home life, and friends, they battle it all. However, with all those things, it is also a time for growth and understanding who they are. This is a challenging time for anyone and was for all of us, but can be particularly difficult for LGBTQ students who often struggle to make sense of their identities, lack support from family and friends, and encounter negative and abusive messaging about themselves, and often face persistent patterns of isolation and exclusion, and feel unsafe and unwelcome at school, home, and work. Hearing slurs and lacking resources relevant to their experience, being discouraged from having same-sex relationships, and being misgendered can make school a hostile environment, which in turn can impact health and well-being. It is not surprising that, according to a study done by the Trevor's Project 2020 National Survey, that 40% of LGBTQ youth seriously consider suicide, or that they're at a 2.5 at the average of being likely to self-harm. These are our kids, our future. The young men and women we allow to be subjected to sanctioned discrimination, bullying, and hate is someone's son or daughter. Please consider the fact that it could be your own son and daughter. As hard as life already is, we should not as adults make life that much harder. We have to be examples for our children. Our greatest role that we should play is preparing our young people for life. However, somewhere along the road, we forgot even the most basic of teachings when it comes to treating each other with respect and dignity. And no matter what faith you ascribe to or don't, our greatest calling should always be love. I would rather be judged on loving too much rather than loving too little. We have let the politics of division, cynicism, and fear sow hatred in us and separate us. Let us not let that parasite that feeds on the best of us bring out the worst in us. Let us not pass that on to our children. We are better, and certainly we owe it to our children to be better. And though I realize these are politically turbulent times, our children's future shouldn't be political tools. They are literally just trying to find their way in life and make it in a world that is already paved in obstacles. The politics of today won't be the world of tomorrow. And we have forgotten it is that we aren't opponents, we are teammates. If our children fail, it's all on us. If we succeed, if they succeed, we all succeed. We have to join together. We have to love one another. We have to move forward in a way that honors the character of our community and all our children's future. Robert Fulghum got it right when he wrote, "All I really need to know I learned in kindergarten." As a reminder, we learn to play fair, say you're sorry when you hurt someone, live a balanced life when you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands, and stick together. I support all these resolutions, and I ask that you do too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Next, we have Rita Pockel, followed by Lisa Ort-Sondergaard, followed by Mika Jenkins. And just a reminder that it is a strict 3 minutes.
Rita Poggle, 1310 Maple Hill Road, Wausau. I will take less than 3 minutes. Thank you. I believe our diversity is our public school's strength. We are no longer a community of mostly European descent. Those days are long gone. So thank you for these resolutions. To me, they say, we hear you. We accept you, even though you may have different beliefs, culture, or sexual orientation. We all have the right to feel safe and accepted. Fairness, respect, and doing what is best for the common good are what a healthy community is all about. I am asking you to please vote or to adopt these resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lisa Ort-Sondergaard, followed by Mika Jenkins, followed by Jackson Seeger.
I'm Lisa Ort-Sondergaard. I reside on Pleasant Drive in Edgar. I'm here as representing myself and as an advocate for the youth of Wausau. I worked for the Wausau School District as a school social worker for nearly 10 years. I'm here to urge you to support the passage of the 3 resolutions on tonight's agenda, if you truly care about kids. The resolution in support of the Hmong, Asian American, Native, Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community, the resolution in support of the transgender, non-binary, and all LGBTQ students, the resolution to recognize May 5th, 2021 as a day of awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. These 3 minority groups are present in the Wausau School District and are oftentimes overlooked, dismissed, bullied, and worse. I know this to be true through my experience as a school social worker. Much of my time was spent in the elementary schools with kids who didn't feel that they fit in, with kids who felt that they didn't belong or were not accepted. Kids as young as 6, we're talking about suicide, 6 years old. I also know that the tone of any organization is set from the top. In this case, it's set by the Wausau School Board. If the school board passes these 3 resolutions tonight, you will be saying to students, family, and staff of these oft marginalized groups that they matter to the Wausau School District. You will be saying that they belong here and have our support. Furthermore, you will be stating to the rest of the students, families, and staff that our strength lies in our unity and diversity. From the news, we know that hate crimes against Asian people have been climbing at an alarming rate. We can't let that continue to happen, and we don't want it to happen here in Wausau. 2020 was the most deadly year for the transgender LGBTQ+ population in our country, and the number of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is absolutely shocking. We know that in order to solve any problem, awareness is key. By declaring May 5th as Awareness Day, we will be saying there is a problem and we need to do something about it. As a school district, we must stand united to say that every person, every student matters. Every person, every student contributes to our community and deserves our protection. Every student deserves a safe learning environment. It is up to you, the School Board of Wausau, to emphatically set the standard through the passage of these resolutions. Thank you, Madam President.
All right, next up we have Mika Jenkins, followed by Jackson Seeger, followed by Michelle Schaefer.
Hello, I'm Mika Jenkins. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I live in Western Wisconsin, and I'm representing the former Wausau West class of 2007. As a trans person, I grew up hiding my identity because I didn't know who I could trust. With a resolution passing of LGBT rights being enforced in schools, it's a great addition to our community and will actually help our community grow, not hinder it. I do hope that we can actually become a better society and actually accept everybody for who they are. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Jackson Seeger, followed by Michelle Schaefer, followed by A.R. Hawkers.
Hello, so my name is Jackson Seeger, and I am representing Wausau Trans Fam Alliance. So I openly identify as a transgender man. At the age of 19, I started and founded Wausau Trans Fam Alliance. I want to state here and now that I am in full support of this resolution due to the fact that our staff and families need to know that our schools are a safe and inclusive place. I want to remind you that when you take and are voted into a position on the school board, you automatically become a role model. Role models do not discriminate. If you do discriminate and only stand up for the youth who meet your expectations, you are not a role model. If you can't separate personal and religious beliefs from what is right, you are not a leader and you don't deserve to sit on this school board. If you sit on this board, I strongly encourage you, if you have not already, to educate yourselves on the minorities that you are serving. These kids are not an ideology. These kids are human, and if you don't pass this resolution, you could be putting their lives at stake. These kids shouldn't have to show up to school with the fear of being verbally, emotionally, and physically assaulted. These kids deserve a board who holds their safety as one of their utmost priorities. Thank you.
All right, next we have Michelle Schaefer, followed by A.R. Huckers, followed by Jeff Johnson.
Michelle Schaefer, 225-180 Blazing Star Street, Wausau. Before I read my statement, I just want to say how happy I am to be here to celebrate Patty. A million years ago, my kids had her, and she was a fabulous teacher. And I want to also acknowledge Beth and Tricia and Jeff. Thank you for your service on the board. I had the privilege of serving with Beth and with Jeff, and it's a wonderful thing that you did, so thank you. I am here this afternoon to speak in support of the proposed resolutions on the agenda today. I commend the Board of Education for publicly supporting all of its students. In adopting these resolutions, you are telling students that you see them, you support them, and you have their backs. Some people question the need to have these resolutions because there are policies that on paper protect all students without singling out a single group, any given group. In a perfect world, these resolutions would not be necessary. We know that hate crimes are up in this country. We know that our youth struggle with their identities, and we know that despite having bullying policies in place, children who are perceived as different are bullied. Our families and students will benefit from these resolutions. Our administration and staff will benefit from these resolutions. These resolutions promote a culture of inclusivity and belonging and make it clear that hate and intolerance will not be accepted in our district. Some of you on this board might not agree with the language in some of the resolutions because of your personal beliefs. I would encourage you to remember that you took the oath of office to serve on this board. You promised to serve all students, not just the ones that live lives that you agree with. Again, thank you for bringing these resolutions forward. We are all better off when we support others to live their very best lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have A.R. Huckers, followed by Jeff Johnson, and that is the last public comment. Mr. Johnson will be.
Good evening, members of the Wausau School Board. My name is Ashley Hockers. I have two great kids in Franklin Elementary. A few years ago, when my son was the ripe old age of first grader, he was yanked out of the boys' bathroom by another boy. How was he yanked? By his hair, which he grew long, because his daddy's hair was long, and he wanted to be just like daddy. He was told by the young man who dragged him out of the bathroom that he was a girl and he belonged in the girls' bathroom. This happened 3 more times before it got shut down. Today, you have resolutions. One of them is in regards to LGBTQ+. Now, if my son was dragged out of a bathroom just for having long hair before, what do you think is going to happen if you don't pass this? We've literally heard from, I don't know, a handful of people that if you don't pass these resolutions, you are signaling that that kind of behavior, yanking a young boy out of a bathroom and shoving him towards a girl's bathroom, is completely acceptable. There is no question. Trans women are women. Trans men are men. When it comes to even sporting events, the Olympics, which we may consider the apex of athletic prowess, lets trans women play as women because they are. Lets trans men play as men because they are. I'd like to point out if there's anybody who's suggesting that there's somehow a way that they will be better at sports. We're not here to promote middle school and high school as hyper-competitive. As far as I'm aware, every single sport in high school and middle school is to achieve camaraderie, work on teamwork. Regarding defining and highlighting the difference between Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, there are people from the east side that get mad if you suggest they're from the west, and vice versa. There are people who are mad if Wisconsin is mashed with Michigan. It's all the same. Define people by who they are. Regarding the resolution to highlight horrors of missing and murdered Indigenous women on May 5th, this is imperative. Women and young girls, especially young girls, need to be aware of the preventative measures that need to be taken. Thank you very much for your time, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Okay, and our final public comment tonight is Jeff Johnson.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is Jeff Johnson. I reside at 4522 Forest Valley Road. I'm County Board Supervisor for District 6, and in full disclosure, I'm married to one of the school board members sitting at the end of the table. That's not Jeff Lee. Okay? These issues come up from time to time before boards. It's come before the county board a number of times with the Pride resolution and with other issues that are seen as divisive, that are seen as separating folks into sides. And it's so very unfortunate because we're not trying to, and my read of the resolutions is not to elevate anyone or single anybody out. It's about raising awareness, and it's about fairness. And it's the same battle that we have at the county level. And it's all driven by the same thing. It's driven by fear. Fear of change, fear of things that are different. Sooner or later, different scares people. And you have a special responsibility in the school district because you're molding minds, you're setting attitudes. Your district, your leadership sets the bar on what's acceptable and what is not. Now, I know from some of the comments I receive that folks are acting out of fear of loss of status a lot of times. We see that time and time again. And that is transferred down to their children. And we see bullying, we see, if you're different, that's not right. Now, I see it as your responsibility to take a stand on all these resolutions. And because they all, the opposition, I believe, is, as I said, rooted in fear. And it doesn't require you to do anything except say, treat everybody well. When you break it down to its basic core, that's all it is. Be aware of things that are wrong because you can't fix them if you don't know. So I don't see why this should be so controversial, but it always is. That's just the reality of the times we live in. So I would ask you to search your soul, do the right thing, and support this district as best you can, and give the kids of all different backgrounds the best shot going forward. I thank you for your time, and have a great night.
All right, thank you. All right, so that concludes the in-person public comment. Thank you everybody who participated. The board also received a number of written public comments. This is something that the board does accept. If you would like to submit written public comment, you go to the district website and then to Board of Education, scroll down, and then there is a link for written public comment and a Google Doc form that can be submitted, and then the board receives that the day of the next meeting. So the board is in receipt of all written public comment that was submitted, and then Clerk Peck will upload that probably in the next day or two, right where the agenda materials are, so that that public comment is available for everybody to read. Okay, so we are moving on. The next item is the resolution in support of transgender, non-binary. Yes?
Policy that I quoted earlier clearly indicated that I can insist these resolutions be tabled and that the next regular meeting of the board include an agenda-setting topic where the board as a whole can decide when or if at all the issues in question will be declared substantive discussion or possible action. I am not necessarily opposed to all of the resolutions, but the policy and the procedure that was used to put them on an agenda at this time, particularly when we have a new board coming on, is really excessive. I, again, would like this matter, item 10, tabled until the whole board can deal with the question and we can have plenty of time for public comment from all sides. And that's only the proper thing to do. To try to force something through at this point does not make any sense. If we want to have the administration give us more information about the amount and extent of discrimination or things that are happening on item 11, and in what's being done with Act 31 regarding item 12, I would welcome that. But in this instance, I really believe that we need to table this item, and it's not a matter of vote. You need to make a decision.
Point of order to the point of order. I believe the original point of order was made on a misreading of the policy. The policy states if an individual board member or committee chairperson disagrees with the board president's decision not to include a particular item of business. It is not about items that are on the agenda. It is about items that have not been put on the agenda. The item is on the agenda. The item can be voted up or down, but it is there and there's nothing improper. The policy does not allow for a challenge of this sort.
Yeah, I thank you for that. And we have had resolutions in the past where it hasn't been an issue. So recall last June, the resolution that was supported unanimously by this board in support of racial equality and social justice. And there certainly weren't any objections raised at that time. So at this point, I would like to explain the background because there's nothing that was out of order in terms of agenda setting. The agenda was still issued at the same time it would be for any regular meeting. These are resolutions. The first two resolutions have been passed by other districts just as recently as last week because of the climate in this community, in the country, and in the state. And I did, it dawned on me that perhaps some board members weren't aware of the climate, so I did draft a memorandum which is publicly available with some significant citation on the 3 different resolutions that is with the agenda materials. So to say that something is out of order, it's false. And I did consult with Dr. Hiltz in advance I would never have pushed for something that didn't have Dr. Hiltz's support, and all three have the support of our superintendent. So I don't want to hear anybody trying to stall something because of a false procedural claim. If you don't want to support the resolutions, you can vote against them. We're not changing any policies, but because of the climate, that's why we are addressing these. Quite frankly, the Wausau School Board doesn't do that many resolutions compared to other districts our size. And there are communities that need reassurances sometimes, that need to hear from the board. And if you don't want to support that, you can vote no. We can do roll call votes on all three, and we can address it that way. But I would like to move forward on the resolution that will go in order as they are in the agenda. The first being the resolution in support of transgender, non-binary, and all LGBTQ plus students. This is actually students, families, and staff. So I'm seeking a motion to approve the resolution in support of transgender, non-binary, and all LGBTQ plus students, families, and staff.
So moved.
Okay, that's a first by Jane Roosh, a second by Jeff Lee. I'd like to do a roll call vote on this.
Oh, then we have discussion?
We can. Yes, no, we certainly can.
So, since I spoke up, I'll speak first. I think the reason for the concern with regard to the timing, and Lee can correct me if I'm wrong, and the concern with some of the speakers that we had tonight, and certainly the emails that we received, is the language of the resolution. So if this resolution was simply asking the board to reaffirm our support of LGBTQ students, I would find it very easy to vote for. If it was paragraphs 1, 2, and 3 in the first, therefore be it resolved, affirming that we support our LGBTQ students, very easy for me to vote for that. I don't think that we would have received the emails that we received or most of the comments that we heard tonight. The problem with the language is the language suggests that this is going to drastically change something. The language suggests that we are not going to follow WIAA rules. Can't believe how many contacts I've received about that. The language suggests that something's going to change with regard to the board-approved guidelines. Some of the new board members here weren't on the board when we approved the administrative rules for transgender students. It was quite a process. You may have thought that what we went through this year was unique, but it was similar to that. We had a lot of meetings. We had to schedule meetings in alternate locations to account for the crowds. We were slammed with emails. We had hours of public comment. We had media requests every week. We eventually got to a point where we approved a set of guidelines that have worked. They've worked for years. They follow the law. I was the president at the time, took a very moderate position in the middle, tried to respect both sides and get consensus, tried to follow the law. My reward for that was a school board campaign to change leadership. Does it sound familiar? Okay, so we went through a lot, but it was worth it because we created a set of rules that work, and we're using it right now in our schools, and they're working. And this is giving the impression, not intended, not intentionally, but it's giving the impression that this is going to change what we're already doing in our schools. And that's why there's been so much resistance to it, both in terms of the timing and then just in general. If it simply said, we want to reaffirm our support of LGBTQ students, easy for me to vote for it. I think it would be unanimous, it would be easy. It's when we start citing laws and referring to the WIA, and that's where it opens up a whole can of worms, and you got to go back through all the committees and bring our attorney back in and go through that whole process again that we spent a year on before.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say, working for who? It works for the majority, but does it work for the students that it affects? But here nor there, you can always offer a change to what's there. It's not necessarily up or down. I mean,
well, what do you think is, what do you believe that this would change?
I'm not saying that this will change anything. I'm saying that you could offer a change
Oh, yeah.
in the wording.
And that's why I want more discussion on. I would be very supportive of those first 3 paragraphs affirming our support of LGBTQ students and supportive of the therefore be it resolved, the first one, again, affirming that. I think that's a good idea. I agree with Tricia regarding the current climate. I think it's good for us to affirm that belief. I just think I would just take out the other stuff that's suggesting it's something different, that something's going to change, and because we certainly, I hope, would not change what we spent a year on with a resolution on a first read, first vote, first night. I mean, that's not what we would do, and I don't think that was the intent. So let's remove the language that suggests to people that it is changing, instead just affirm that we support these students.
Well, I have a question. Don't the last whereases, I mean, they already happened and they're already executive orders, U.S. Supreme Court, I mean, those already passed. So aren't those laws of the land that we as the board have to follow already anyways? So why?
So our guidelines do. Our guidelines do follow the law. So for example, whereas the WIA supports transgender students' participation in athletics, that provision caused a bunch of people to contact me and think that something was going to change. Most people don't understand what the WIA requirements are, and you couldn't fit it into a little provision here. It's an extensive requirement, and those are the rules that we follow. And so I think rather than trying to have a debate about what this case means or what the WIA standards are, I think it's better to just simplify it to do what I believe the intent was anyway, which is to affirm our support for these students, which I do believe is important. I think the rest of it detracts from it. The rest of it makes it, it doesn't bring unity. You know, it's creating conflict as opposed to bringing us all together on something that we should easily agree on.
So Lance, just to clarify, problems with 5, 6, and 7, I hear what you're saying about 8, the concerns there. I do have citations I just emailed to the board in regards to that provision, but what are the concerns with 5, 6, and 7?
So I like provisions 1, 2, and 3, which are just very general affirming. Provision 4, it is correct. That is what Title VII of the Civil Rights Act says. I don't know that it's necessary to put it in here. And that's regarding employees, not students. Title VII is for employment, not for students. You know, 5, again, that's Title VII. I agree. The Supreme Court did hold that for employees. I think most would assume that the same reasoning would apply to the term sex in Title IX as well. I don't know why it wouldn't apply in Title IX if it applies in Title VII. So I agree with you in concept, but these are the provisions that we would need to spend a lot of time debating and going through. It would need to go back through committee, not come first read at a meeting like this. And why? Why get in the weeds with all of that? Why invite a big debate about what does the WIA supports transgender students provision mean when we can just say that we support our LGBTQ students and affirm that we support them and that we want a welcoming and open you know, educational system for all students, and I just think this takes away from it.
No, Lance, I understand, and I could get on board with omitting the WIAA provisions because I don't want it to be a distraction, and that's not changing. And if that level of detail, I did send some information, but I could support that coming out. I'm just curious about the earlier ones because they're just statements of law that they're not untrue. I don't know what to debate on that. These different laws that are cited earlier.
Well, so paragraphs 4 and 5 refer to Title VII. Mm-hmm. I believe that eventually the courts will also say that the term sex in Title IX is to be interpreted the same as in Title VII. I think that will happen, but why put that in there right now when it hasn't yet happened? And we already are operating, I mean, our guidelines that we operate under now treat that as though that is the law. That is how we currently operate. So that does nothing to change our current practices. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this paragraph 6, again, with all due respect to the president, that was a statement, but it's a statement that just is a statement. It doesn't change anything, you know. So we have the WIA, which we follow. We have our board guidelines that we follow. I think that just overly complicates it.
So taking out those 6 whereas clauses, are there concerns with any of the 3, therefore be it resolved?
I think the first one is good, that it affirms supports and values. I like that one. I think the second one sort of says the same thing. The third one says that we would reject legislation. I mean, that works both ways. So when I stood up in front of everybody and said, look, we have laws that we have to follow, and that includes laws that protect our LGBTQ students, I have to stay consistent with that. We follow the laws. So if there is a law that I don't agree with, we don't get to reject it. We don't get to reject laws. We follow the law. So I wouldn't keep the third one. The second one, I think, sort of says the same thing as the first, but I'm fine with it.
Yeah, Lance, I'd agree on that last comment. We can't reject laws. That's just not in our purview. So that should probably be taken out. The argument that will cause misunderstanding, I think that cat's already out of the bag.
Well, I would say it will cause a misunderstanding. It already has.
It's already happened, so there's no need to worry about that. I think we have stated clearly tonight that nothing is changing. Nothing changes in policy. And so I think we have made that statement to the public now, and that's the way it is. And so I wouldn't see any need to change the rest of the document.
Well, one of the questions, I guess, or the only concern that I have, everything that Lance said, I absolutely agree with in terms of making this easy.
Can you speak up, Pat? We need to speak up.
Hello? Sorry about that. Is that better?
Get it as close to your mouth as possible.
We'll just talk into it like
there you
this.
Go.
There you go.
All right. I agree with everything Lance said. It should be absolutely a very easy resolution for everybody to support. The concerns that I heard today, and frankly I had myself, was the lack of time between these being put on the agenda and being asked to take action tonight. I believe these hit, the revised agenda was sent out Friday for these, so we've had maybe 1.5 business days for people to digest this. Look at the support and all the wonderful comments that we heard tonight based off a day and a half. If we properly, or I can't say properly, I'm not saying it was improper, typically resolutions we had gone through and they started at the Ed Ops committee level. And we had a chance to have all of this discussion, and we had a chance to ask more questions and to get more data on whatever the particular resolution was. I mean, we went through and cut out individual words and all sorts of things. So the timing of this, I think, is where I saw the most concern. And frankly, people are wondering, why the need to do this in a day and a half. Why can't we have a little bit more leeway for people, or lead time for people to digest this? Perhaps there's more people that want to come to public comment and do this how we had handled resolutions historically.
That was precisely my point, Pat, that we just did not have time. And based on the amount of reaction that I've gotten from both sides, and including some wonderful comments here tonight, it just seems to me that this is something that is not, we're using the time that, frankly, the intent, I recognize that I took liberty, there's liberty with the policy. However, the intent of that policy was that we have time to review things, to look them over, and there is no need to press this tonight, and we're using precisely exactly the extra time that we didn't need to be spending, that we could have been spending if it was on an agenda item in a committee rather than for the full board today.
And we've done other resolutions in single meetings. We've had special meetings. We could have a special meeting next week if it's going to come to that. The point of this is the climate, whether it's the anti-LGBTQ plus sentiment that I indicated by significant citation happening in the country, happening in the state. We just saw this with the state superintendent, Department of Public Instruction race, where this became a big issue. And this is an issue in the community as well. We look at other public bodies and see the differences that are occurring. And our students, families, and staff deserve to know that this is an inclusive environment. So I can get on board with eliminating the provisions that Lance is identifying as problematic, and I can support that because I think I think it's important to send a message. And people have reached out to me personally with their concerns. And I don't want to betray their statements to me, but there's serious concern in the community. And it's time to just affirm that this district supports everyone. It's inclusive of everybody.
And I have a question for both Lee and Pat, because we all heard those same concerns. We got the same emails. Don't you think much of that concern, though, had to do with the language and the provisions that were in here? And if it was a very short...
Lance, pull your mic a little closer.
Don't you think that a lot of the timing concern related to the provisions that were in here, and if it was a short resolution affirming the support for the LGBTQ students, that we wouldn't have received those concerns? It wouldn't have been suggested to us that it has to go through committee and we have to have hours of discussion. It would just be us affirming that support. I think if it was the first three provisions and the first therefore be it resolved, you wouldn't have had that feedback. You wouldn't have had those complaints about the timing of it. That's the sense that I have.
And I can get on board with that. I could definitely take all of Lance's suggestions. The only change I would make is to add to the
Jane, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you in the last part.
She'd like to add staff. I think families and staff would be ideal.
Yes.
So I understand that, and as I pointed out before, we didn't do anything different with agendizing the topic. There are action items that get posted on Fridays for Monday meetings. So nothing has been different here.
But no, it has, because the last resolutions we started in committee, they were the ones that were submitted to WASB, and they went through how many iterations through the meetings? Those were not dropped on us on a Monday or on a Friday and says, here you go, you're going to vote for these in their entirety on Monday.
Our racial equity and social justice was a resolution that we just passed in a meeting.
Going to the State School Board Association for approval. This is just meant for here.
But I still take them just as seriously. The fact that nothing is going to change here, right? Maybe something should change. At least give us the time to document this. I mean, I wrote down items from Mr. Harris, 2 times more likely to, inflict self-harm. I'd like to understand more about that. What could we be doing differently?
But passing this doesn't prevent you from learning more.
I absolutely agree with that, and that's fine. But if we're going to have it, and if we want it to be more substantive, then we should take the time and afford it the respect that it deserves and give us some time to walk through it.
I think it basically affirms current practices, so I don't see a need to study it more if this is what we're already doing.
If you go with the suggested changes, I agree with you.
And certainly I would encourage board members to do more research if you are unaware of the higher rates of suicide, depression, anxiety, mental health issues that are experienced by the LGBTQ plus community. But that's not really what we're doing here. We're just saying that we want you here, that this is an inclusive environment where you're treated equal, and we give all of our students, families, and staff the dignity and respect their privacy, quite frankly. That's what this is about, and there's anxiety in the community. There are concerns. And if we can address this, and we can do it in the modified way, as suggested by Lance, to be able to make it workable, I think that we should do that tonight. And we can eliminate those different provisions and still have this resolution in support.
Why would we do it tonight when it isn't an immediate crisis? It's something that we can take time to take a look at, and the whole board can look at it, and especially, why open this up when we've got a new board coming in right now? I mean, this is not good timing, and I just think we need to take time to think about it, to have the opportunity to discuss it in a more open manner. That's all I'm asking, is that we take time to process this, and we not use the time tonight.
And
among other things, I'm having a horrible time hearing half the presentations of people that are talking.
Time, Lance, that you have, Lance, Lee, that you have referenced the new board coming in. Because there was election does not take away the voice and the vote of the 3 members that will be leaving.
So we still have important work to do here, and this is an issue in the community now, not something to be worked on and deliberated for months on end. I think it's simple, it's straightforward. We can move forward with the modifications.
Do you want me to make a motion to amend it so we can officially amend it? Okay, so.
And speak up while you're doing that.
Sure. So I move that we amend the resolution to add staff and families in the title, right, Jane? To remove provisions paragraph 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and the third, therefore be it resolved.
All in favor?
Aye.
So, yeah, we don't need to roll call that, I don't think.
Yeah, that's just on the amendment.
That's just the amended, and then, is that, that's just voting on accepting the amendment?
That's just the amendment, so Jane seconded it,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Okay, that motion carries. So now we've actually amended it, but we have to vote on the amended resolution.
Correct.
Okay.
President Zumke,
yes.
I just wanted to share with the board, after these were introduced, I did reach out to some of our principals to get some feedback and some other administrators about their perception of, what staff and students, how they would react to this. And while there aren't a large number of reported incidents, there is a lot of feedback from our staff and students about so oftentimes they don't feel supported. They do feel marginalized. And so to the extent that this simplified resolution could reinforce within our staff and our students our support of them, I think it is a healthy move, and I just wanted to share that anecdotal, at least, perspective from some of our building leaders.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. So now I'm seeking...
Madam President, yes. I just want to be clarified on this. I want to go through this one more time, Lance. I want to correlate, because this is the thing that I'm sure that Lee was pointing out. This is good dialogue. Having everybody come here and talk to us is good to hear. This is being transparent, but at the same time, it didn't really have to happen that way. So I want to go through this and make sure that I have this down as we move forward. So we have paragraph 1, 2, 3 that's going to stay. We've got 10 and 11 that are going to stay. So that means 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are gone.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And we've already amended the motion, so we don't need to take a new first and second. We just need to vote now on the amended motion.
Okay, so...
Therefore is also...
Yeah, he said
stricken.
That one. Yep.
Yep. So, so then, if we could do this in a roll call vote, Kathy, and we just need to vote on it then.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes. Okay, so that resolution in support of transgender, non-binary, and all LGBTQ plus students, staff, and families passed 8-1, 8 yes, 1 no. Okay, the second resolution This is next agenda item 10, I believe, or will we modify the numbers here? So the next agenda item is the resolution in support of the Hmong, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community. And the reason behind this resolution is because of the increased violence and bias that we are seeing throughout the country, and also in the community as it relates to Asian American populations. If you read the memo, there were 2 incidents in the nearby community of Weston just over the weekend, affecting among student and among family member. And the district recently took a position and sent an email and to assist families, but the board actually hasn't taken a position. And there's a high number of Asian American students that are actually choosing to stay remotely, as is reported throughout the country, because of fear of violence, fear of bias, fear of bullying in schools. And it's just important to send a message again of being safe, that our buildings, our classrooms are safe. So I consulted with Clerk Lowe to get her input, and she pointed out that even though a lot of language uses AAPI, there's a Native Hawaiian population that deems that to be erasure. So that's why the language is Hmong, Asian American, and then the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander community. Are there any comments or questions about this resolution?
The only, we received a little bit of feedback asking, and so I'm asking, because I'm far from an expert on this, asking whether or not this in any way alienates any other minority groups if we select one as opposed to a resolution that supports all minority groups. I think the answer to that maybe would be this is in response to recent events and that's why. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's a good enough answer. I just wanted to bring it up because it's something that we heard from, and it makes sense to me that it's a question. I support it in general. That's my only worry, is that I wouldn't want to give the impression to any other minority groups that we don't also support you and understand the prejudice that you face as well.
I think that's an important point, and I'm glad that you're raising that so we can be very transparent about it. These communities are facing increased violence and attacks because of the racist names that have been given to COVID-19. It's not meant to elevate one population over another, but rather recognize in this time the fact that our buildings still are safe, our district is safe. So thanks for pointing that out, but that's the impetus behind it.
Yeah, I also want to say that I had to respond to some emails and let people know that passing this resolution doesn't mean that we're ignoring everyone else. It doesn't mean that. So to even see an email saying that to me, a member of the Asian community, where my parents were in war, allies to the United States. My dad lost his parents because he was in that war, fighting for the United States. I lost my grandfather in that war because they decided to fight with the United States. And to hear stories of Hmong veterans who are being called names and being thrown things at when they put their lives on the line, that makes me sad. I am trying really hard to not lose faith in this community, but it's really hard to hear that, to have people who I think always supported our community to write me an email and to say that to me. That is disgusting. It is disgusting. We gave up so much to be here. And for us to hear that, for me to hear that, I just can't. It is disgusting. So I hope that everyone here hears this in me, that I love this country, I love this community. But for me to get emails like that in this community, no. It is disgusting, and we put our lives on the line for the United States. And I would hope that people here would treat us with the dignity and honor and respect that we deserve.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other comments? Thank you. And thank you so much, Clerk Lowe. Your voice is so important on this board, and I appreciate all the input and everything that you've been able to provide to make sure that we capture, hopefully accurately, in this resolution. So with that, I am seeking a motion to approve the resolution in support of the Hmong, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community.
Second.
Okay, that's a first by Beth Martin and a second by Lance Trollope. Could we do all the resolutions by roll call vote, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Beth Martin?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, so that resolution to, in support of the Hmong, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community passed 9 yes, 0 no. Okay, last resolution on the agenda. This is recognizing May 5th, 2021 as a day of awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And I don't know if everybody got a chance to review my presentation, but the reason that I brought this to the board is because there are efforts underway throughout the whole community between the county board and the city of Wausau to recognize missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. There's a national movement for May 5th. The state of Wisconsin has previously declared this through the legislature. And the Diversity Affairs Commission, it's working its way through those channels on the county board. And then Mayor Rosenberg already indicated that she will be doing a proclamation. I'll be giving a presentation to City Council. But the reason that the public education component dawned on me is because there's so many different angles to this crisis, and an important part is education. We've talked at length how Act 31 is not complied with throughout the state in great detail. We certainly take that very seriously here in the Wausau School District, but it's very difficult. Just recently I gave testimony to the DNR about changing a lake up where you previously were, Jim, a very derogatory name of a lake that is a very negative name for a woman, an Indigenous woman. And I was describing how words dehumanize, and dehumanization leads to violence. And we've taken a position in the past as it relates to Native American mascots and nicknames, symbols, imagery. And recently when I met with Representative Ron Kine virtually, I said, we really need to study on the relationship between dehumanizing nicknames and mascots and this missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls crisis because of that dehumanizing language. So the reason that I brought it to the district is because, or to the board, is because of that public education component. And there's other parts of it too. Whether we're talking about, we heard about Human Growth and Development Committee in public comment, so whether we're talking about ensuring that everyone, not just Indigenous girls, learn about healthy relationships, or that students can identify human trafficking and things of that nature. And then, of course, the role of ACEs and how that's addressed in the public school district. So there's just a lot here, and this is a crisis that involves a lot of different partners, but this is something that's going to be addressed by other local public bodies, which is why the request came to this board.
I really appreciate that the meaning and the intent and this particular motion. My concern about this one is that Act 31 is very clear about what we need to be doing about educating about Native American populations and history. And I was thinking of something much broader, that we really need to be including this kind of data and information in our presentations so that students understand the extent of the discrimination that's taken place. In addition, I really do believe that on a broader level, we need to be alerting our kids to the issues around human trafficking and the specific dangers at every grade level that kids might be facing in our community, because we're not isolated anymore. And so I support this. I just really think that we need to be looking at a broader look at curriculum and some other pieces around these whole issues.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a crisis that there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle. But the first step in being able to address a crisis is awareness. And so I hope that there is support from the board tonight.
If I may say something, Madam President, this is a good time for me to commend you and thank you for putting my daughter-in-law up for the Wall of Fame for her work and really working against trafficking. She and my son have done a lot, working with people from India, working with our Native Americans from northern Wisconsin and northern Minnesota. And having you do that, I wanted to thank you for that. We're very proud of what the work they're doing for women around the world.
Yeah, that's incredible work that they're doing too. So thank you for that.
I do have one question.
Yes, question?
Yeah, so the title refers to May 5th of 2021. The first, therefore, let it be resolved, just says May 5th in general. Is that meant to say 2021?
It was just specific to this year. It can go either way, quite frankly. That I appreciate the precision. That wasn't.
Yeah, I thought your intent was to have it be May 5th of 2021, not to be May 5th, every May 5th for the rest of
No, I think
existence.
well, I mean, it would be nice, but I think the intent is really the community awareness, the joint community awareness this year.
Right.
Okay, so I'm seeking a motion to approve the resolution recognizing May 5th, 2021 as a day of awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
So I would make that motion with that one change to say 2021. That's a first.
Second.
Okay, it does say 2021.
It just says recognizes May 5th as a day of awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous.
Oh, and therefore be it resolved.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm sorry, who was the first? Okay, first from Lance Trollope, second from Pat McKee.
John Wolf,
Yes.
Beth Martin,
Yes.
Pat McKee,
Yes.
Jane Root,
Yes.
Lance Trollope,
Yes.
Lee Webster,
Yes.
Jim Boucher,
Yes.
Jeff Lee,
Yes.
Tricia Becker,
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, so that resolution passed 9-0. Thank you. Okay, so our next item on the agenda is approving the consent agenda. I'd like to acknowledge the donations to the district. Those donations include County Materials Corporation, Jennifer Davis, Beverly Jackson, anonymous donors, Jeff Heiting, Marathon County Library, UW-Madison Division of Extension Foodwise Program, Trek Bicycle Store, Julie Gasky, Sarah Clawiter, and Raj Bandari. Thank you so much. I'm seeking a motion to approve the consent agenda with great gratitude for those donations to the district.
Second.
All right, that's a first by Jane Root and a second by Pat McKee. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is contract renewals, non-renewals. And I'm sorry, Tabitha, were you going to present anything on this topic, or we can just move to motion on it?
I'm here if you have any questions. I would want to emphasize that this is being done in open session because it is a programmatic reduction due to lack of student enrollment, and it has nothing to do with performance in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you. So with that, I am seeking a motion to approve the issuance of a preliminary notice of non-renewal for Mr. Oliver Burrows, project-based learning teacher at Wausau East High School. Okay, that's a first by Jane Roosh, a second by Beth Martin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, and that was a 9-0 vote. Next we have referendum update. And so I'll turn this over to Bob.
They're working on the screen. Okay, mic is working and the screen is working. So what you see on the screen behind you matches a narrative that I put in board book, and there are some still shots in board book. This is going to be a little bit more animated. But I would like to talk about the April 6th referendum election, and I would like to thank the community and say how proud I am of the community for taking time to be engaged on these two questions and learn all they can through a variety of different means, and coming to the polls and voting in the affirmative on question number 1 for a much needed $4 million of recurring revenue limit authority to address primarily pupil services staff, but some other things. I'm going to talk about question 1 that passed in a little while. I want to talk a little bit first about question 2, the one that failed. Any good strategy, and we've been in the middle of one that regarding referendum voting and bond issues in particular for 5 years. Any good strategy allows you to go forward with options even when the desired outcome isn't achieved. It happened in November. We were trying to pass 2 referendum questions. We got neither one of those questions, but we were in the middle of a strategy that allowed us to still move forward. And we're at that same crossroads right now. We failed one question in April, the bond question for $148.8 million. And what we try to do as an administrative team is bring decisions to you that won't paint you into a corner. We want to offer a strategy that will allow you to go forward, and if you get the desired outcome, move forward with a plan, and if you don't get the desired outcome, still allow some flexibility and not limit your options. If you take a look at the graph, this is where we're at now. I even put a big now up there. Furthermore, what I'm going to show you on the screen, we talked about prior to the vote. Earlier in February and March, we were having this discussion with the community because plenty of people asked the question, what happens if the referendum fails? And at that point, that was a pretty complex question because it included both of them fail, one of them fails, number 2 fails, both of them pass. There were 4 different scenarios that we could entertain. And we talked about all of them as best as we could, but you couldn't really focus because there were so many things that could have happened. At this point, we know question number 1 passed. It's represented by the amber colored bar graph. That's going to add to the levy. It's going to be expensive for taxpayers if you want to think of it that way. $4 million in spending authority, reduced by 22% state aid. Question number 2 failed. So these aren't interactive buttons anymore. It failed. There was a green part of the bar graph that you won't see because it failed. So going forward, what's our strategy? And some people have as a strategy, fail the referendum and force taxes to go down. That strategy and that play is still alive. But it takes patience if you want to execute that strategy. Similar to the way the November referendum failed, didn't alone make taxes go down. An April failed referendum alone doesn't make taxes go down. So with the second failed referendum, you'll notice the bar graph drops, spending goes down. In the state of Wisconsin, we're under a shared spending and shared aid model. When our spending goes down, we get less aid. As a matter of fact, the absence of the green bar graph that represented question 2, spending goes down about $9.5 million. We lose $2 million in aid. So we have to recapture that $2 million with a local levy. We have to tax taxpayers $2 million. So if Glenn up in the box gives me a hand, if we click on this button right here, lost impact on aid, you see that go up a little bit because the tax needs to go up to recapture the lost aid. And the bar graph over, or the line graph over here is just the mill rate. If we go back to how can the taxes go up and the mill rate goes down? Remember, the mill rate is how much tax you pay per property value. So it's diluted by property values going up, right? So you very easily could have levy go up and mill rate go down. So we lose aid, and we'd have to recapture that. To avoid losing aid, a strategy that you've been in the midst of for 4 years already, so it would not come as a surprise to anybody, to continue that strategy for one more year, it's the strategy of prepaying debt, prepaying callable debt, in an effort to save millions of dollars in interest payments for taxpayers, in an effort to capture more state aid, $2 million for just this year alone, in an effort to stabilize the mill rate, and also in an effort to take another year to seriously consider another referendum question. That obviously will not be my decision, right? It'll be a board decision, but at least it keeps that play alive, right? It doesn't paint us into a corner. So if we're going to continue that strategy that we've been in the midst of for 4 years already, if Glenn, you unclick this one, you did already? Well, you click it again just to show me. Okay, you lose aid, you click it again. To avoid the loss in aid, we can prepay debt. Did you already click on that one too? Okay, prepaid debt. And it supports the levy that we had this year for one more year by prepaying some callable debt. If you're interested in the numbers, they're all in the document that I wrote in the narrative. We have about $12.5 million worth of prepayable debt. We wouldn't prepay all of it, we'd prepay about 9.5 million of it. Real close to the number that represented question 2. So you prepay debt, save millions of dollars in interest. You generate as much state aid as possible, $2 million in this case. You keep a level levy, a declining mill rate while that's happening, and you entertain the thought of another question. There are needs that haven't been met right now. $54 million in deferred maintenance alone. Needs are not met. Now we can talk about how we're going to address those needs. We can learn from the community once again why the referendum failed. What in the community did you like about the question? What in the community didn't you like about the question? Why didn't you vote maybe? I think there were 300 people that went to the polls but didn't vote for either question. Is that correct? So learn some of those things and spend another year, because April of 22 is the earliest we could do this. Spend another year on a plan that will address the needs in what we consider the most affordable and least impactful way to taxpayers. Now, if we click on this one, Glenn, pass, fail, that's actually the numbers for the same exact question that just failed. I wanted to make an assumption I had to start somewhere, so it's the exact same $148.8 million in borrowing, 2.5% interest over 20 years. And notice how it fits in. It's a little bit smaller in payments here, it's a little bit bigger in payments here. That's pretty typical. You make it wrap around the existing debt profile. So that would be an opportunity to work on another question. If you continue the strategy that you've already proven is successful for 4 years, continuing it for a 5th year, you would use $9 million of your $12.5 million of callable debt. You would still have some callable debt left. You'd be running out of it pretty quickly. But if you unclick that one, Glenn, and you click on this one, you would lose aid then, because spending would then go down. And when spending goes down, they measure it that year, and the next year they offer aid based on the spending. Spending goes down, aid goes down the next year, so the tax would have to go up. So now you've got this bounce down, it kind of comes back up, and that in itself is a pretty good profile. I'd love to see that profile for our taxes if it weren't for all the unmet needs. that we believe pretty strongly in. Deferred maintenance and learning spaces and some spaces for all of our pupil services staff that we're going to be hiring real soon to work out of. So yes, mill rate goes down $1.50, maybe $2, but you're doing it without meeting the needs. And you're still left with that question. And when you do finally bring it back, and you do convince the community it's the right thing to do, now you're going to do it in a more impactful way for taxpayers, because you're going to be asking taxpayers to vote yes with a significant tax increase. And yes, we did get some criticism for using the words no impact. And the minute we started to get that criticism, we made it a part of our traveling roadshow to talk about what no impact means. And we created a video like this. We didn't talk about no impact as much. We talked about keeping your taxes flat. And if we ever go back to this, we're going to have to be very careful about how we choose our words, and maybe create this video on the first day, and change some other things. I'm not suggesting that was the one thing that made it fail, right? We're going to have to get serious about learning from the community what made it fail. So this is all in board book, and it's all about question number 2, which failed. I want to spend some time talking about question 1 that was successful. So Glenn, if you can flip this to Cassie's screen, we'll be able to go back to this if you have any questions. And you're probably pretty aware of this because we've been in the middle of this strategy for quite some time. So it wouldn't surprise me if you don't have questions. But we're going to have 3 new board members up here real soon. So we're educating the new board members also, and I can do some of that one-on-one as well. In board book, you're going to see this graph, and this graph is a general plan for what we're doing with the first question that passed, the $4 million in additional recurring revenue limit authority. And we spend a lot of time talking about pupil services staff, pupil services staff. We need pupil services staff. And if we need to, I'm sure somebody's here that can probably speak more eloquently. Angie Lloyd's over there, so if we get any real big questions. But the lion's share of the $4 million, pupil services staff. We also know that there's a labor market that's going to make it difficult to hire all of our pupil services staff simultaneously. We also know that we're not going to have offices and spaces in which to work out of. So we're not going to hire all of our pupil services staff immediately. This blue gets bigger and bigger and bigger as some of the salaries and personnel costs go up. We hire more people. We provide spaces somehow for them to work out of. And this is an interesting one, about 2024, and I'm going to talk about this more in the end of April. We run out of ESSER funding. That's federal stimulus money for recovery from the pandemic, recovery and learning loss. It's one-time money, but they're allowing us to use it over 3 or 4 years, significant amount of money. If we spend any of that money on personnel, we have to get comfortable with either saying goodbye to the personnel in 2024 or finding an alternative funding source. Fits in perfectly with this. We don't want to hire all personnel, but if there are some personnel that we're using ESSER funds to still fund in 2024, that's why it bends up a little bit sharper right there. We could start using some of this $4 million in spending authority to continue funding some of the things that ESSER gave us a very good start on. We'll talk about that a lot more on April 26th, ESSER in particular. The red band, immediate operational needs. We know there are some areas in different budgets that are just lacking the financial support right now. Our pupil services department has changed dramatically. The budget hasn't. That budget needs some support. There are a couple other things where the budgets need support. That strand exists. We talked about this peach-colored one out in the community a lot. These short-term assets, equipment that needs replacement. Maybe it's musical instruments. Maybe it's other fine arts equipment. Maybe it's lab equipment in classrooms. Maybe it's athletic equipment. We know it's some of these short-term assets like display units in classrooms, or uninterruptible power supplies, if you know what those are. These replacement assets that we don't feel good about using 20-year money to purchase. They wear out too quickly. So some of that was, we talked about during the referendum campaign. If the blue is going to go up, something's got to go down. So we're going to replace some of these short-term assets, and that dollar amount's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller until after 5 years, we still have a sliver, and that's designed to get on a consistent replacement schedule, and we continuously replace them. And then the green, I tried to make it as small as possible. That's an allowance to withstand some of the volatility that comes out of Madison with state budgets. Sometimes you get some really good budgets, sometimes you get not such a good budget, and that would allow for funding some of that instability. This is a general plan. It's bound to change. It's probably guided more by how many of those people services staff we can hire. And with this peach color, we have plenty of expenses right now with the failed question number 2. Question number 2 could have supported a lot of classroom technology, could have supported LED lighting, could have supported some of those other facility improvements. We don't have a question number 2, at least right now we don't. So we can also use part of question number 1 to fund some of that. That's the end of at least my prepared remarks. I'll stay here and answer questions as long as you have them, unless Dr. Hiltz, you want to add something?
No, thanks for, excuse me, thanks for the update. No, let's see if there's questions.
Yeah, I have a comment and a couple questions. A comment just as to compliment the administrative team on the informational campaign. I think you guys did a wonderful job. Actually saw a couple complaints of getting too much information, which I think is a good thing. I'd rather see that than not getting enough. One of the consistent themes that I saw or heard for the no vote was schools didn't start fully in person, or they didn't go to fully in person fast enough. You couldn't change that during the informational campaign. It was what it was. I have no doubt that made up more than 75 votes. So I think you guys did a good job. I think that we certainly need to start talking about, the next referendum. I've been telling people that are disappointed that it didn't pass that it's going to pass, because the needs aren't going to go away. So we are going to pass something similar to this at some point. The disappointing thing is each year that goes by, I fear that we're either going to get less done or it's going to cost more, because I'm afraid the expense is going to go up, especially the interest. And of course, each year that goes by, it's 1 year of students that don't get to enjoy the benefits of it as well. But I think it's going to pass. The question I would have is, not to be answered tonight, but when we start talking about it again from administration is, are we going to have to start talking about boundary changes and programming cuts this year to be in place if the referendum doesn't pass next April, or will we be able to put that off another year? We don't want to run into a situation where we assume the referendum's going to pass and then it fails, and now we have to make quick decisions on, we have a roof that needs to be replaced, or we have programs we have to cut to pay for it. So I'd like to hear some information about how long we can survive pushing that off before we have to start talking about cuts and boundary changes, because having been through the boundary change thing before, it's not easy.
And when you talk about security, I've been going into the buildings this year and taking a look myself to see what kind of security that we have. We're definitely going to have to address that as we continue down the road. And the comment made earlier about HVAC and how is that going to be affected as we go forward, because a lot of teachers continue to ask about that. And we do know in some of the older buildings that's in dire need. And how are we going to take care of that is the question that I'm hearing continuously. And why haven't we taken care of that's the other part of that question. And I can't answer that because I wasn't here before. So those are questions that are coming out, and those are questions that are going to continue to be asked. And your comment before, Bob, selecting words is going to be so important, because a lot of people, I don't think, really heard what you were trying to get across, and communication's a two-way street. How we deliver and then how they hear. And we got to learn from our community what they needed to hear.
But you answered the one, because I thought, oh, now we have the money to hire the staff, but where are we going to put them? But the other two were, I'm concerned about the Red Lodge out at the school forest, because if anybody has been out to the school forest, the Red Lodge is truly on its last legs. I don't know how much more we can beef it up, but now it's got to last at least another year beyond what it would have had to last had this passed. And the other one was, during this last drive for this referendum, I kept hearing people talk about the school district needs to live within its means. And it's so frustrating because the kind of entity that we are, we can't save and buy like people buy a house. And I don't know how you reach those people. I mean, it was a significant number of people that kept saying, you know, you should just save and do it that way.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%, but I wonder how much more you can do, because I guarantee those people didn't actually attend the presentations where it was explained. You know what I mean? I mean, what more can you do other than, if they won't read the information or attend the presentation or listen to a board meeting, to understand why we can't budget that way, and why, and Bob has done a good job explaining that this is how we're supposed to budget. We're supposed to stay with our flat operating levy limit, and then when we need to do something extensive, we go to the voters and get approval. That's what we're supposed to do. And but if you close your eyes and your ears, and I don't know what the answer is to that.
You're exactly right, and that an element of that will be more people saying what you just said. And if we get a lot of people saying that we are living within our means, and state funding is set up in such a way and designed for us to go to the voters and ask the level of support they desire in their school district, if we repeat that often enough and we get others repeating that often enough, we'll get people to understand that that's school finance in Wisconsin. Certainly since 2010, that's school finance in Wisconsin. You need to go to the voters to ask the authority to support the level of funding they have been supporting. And if we get more people saying that, more people will understand it and believe it. I'm sorry, Beth.
I think it's important to point out that this community has spoken and said that they really value having as many school buildings as we have. And when we've tried to gain economies of scale, that's been rejected. But that costs more. So you can't have it both ways. You either have to say, this is really important to our community and we're willing to pay for it, or we need to cut. We need to close some buildings, we need to change some boundaries to save money, because we have to maintain those buildings, and if we had less buildings to maintain, it wouldn't cost as much. So that's the dichotomy that voters are going to have to decide what is more important to them. And if they decide again and reject an operational referendum or a building referendum to address some of these needs, then we will have to make the cuts. Or you will have to.
I have no doubt that the pandemic impacted votes in a negative way. I think there was still misinformation in the community about whether schools were actually open. Schools have always been open, but I think that impacted enough voters. And we're hearing different concerns, but I have to say I was really disappointed because we have 2 elementary schools that don't have air conditioning. And it's just so unfair to those students and staff that have to teach and learn in that environment, and I really wanted them to get that air conditioning.
Bob, can I follow up on Jane's point about the Red Lodge, because I think it's important? At some point in the near future, could we get a status of where that fundraising campaign is at with what the foundation has done? And I know we sold timber and all that, but it would be nice to see a reconciliation in terms of, here was the last estimate,
Sure.
what we wanted to do, here's where we're at, you know, with our revenue-wise, and what does that delta look like
Yeah, that's
today?
a good idea. I see Dr. Hiltz is writing that down right now. We'll talk to the foundation and we'll find a status report from both their perspective and ours. And we did have considerable revenue available from sale of timber and the sale of a couple other properties. And we spent some of it on investments that would be needed no matter what, if the Red Lodge were there or not. As an example, the foundation invested, I believe, $60,000 or $70,000 in a more robust electrical service to the school force, which we needed anyway. you authorized the fiber line. The fiber was $400,000. So we already made some of those investments that would make any work that private donors do less of a lift, and perhaps another referendum question less of a lift, or alternative funding sources, who knows what else. But you're right, that would be great for the board to see where we're at and what kind of dollars we need. It was the only new building in the referendum. But in terms of new buildings, I think the dollar amount that we were carrying was pretty small. It was like $4 million for that brand new building.
Well, and I wonder if we somehow could not, if we could get that accomplished. I have no idea how or what the gap is, but to use that as kind of a marketing campaign to say, here, these are the types of things that this referendum will accomplish, right? Now, we were able to do this one with these funds. Here's what it means for the bigger picture. I just think people could get excited when they see, some of the tangible assets that we keep building.
I agree, and the matching element of it is something that excites people also. Like, we're bringing something to the table, not just asking taxpayers for all of it, because we sold some other holdings that we put aside, harvested timber. That's a great story right there at the school forest. Some people's grandmas and grandpas planted those trees. Foundation is coming through with some private donations, and community really loves that matching element. They're not asked to do the whole lift on their own. Somebody's helping them lift. We'll bring you some kind of report.
We can get the administration to offer car washes and bake sales this time.
If that'll do it, let's do that. And any time I can spend at the school forest, it's a day well spent, to be honest. Look for reasons to go out there.
So one thing I want to add is being on county board, the one thing that we found that kind of works is that before drawing up plans for a referendum, have town hall meetings, or asking the public to come in and give their ideas first for what they see, what they want for the district, if we're going to go into referendum again. I think it's helpful to get people's ideas first before drawing up plans, coming up with, building drawings, because when you create a plan and then you ask for people's input, then they're kind of like, well, now I'm kind of stuck in this corner, because now we're looking at these plans, and what if I don't like these plans? I want to change these plans. So what's been helpful in the past is we ask for public input first. What do they want? What do they want to see? And then you draw those plans from there. That way the community feels like they're being listened to, they can see some of their ideas in the plans, and then you get buy-in. So that's been really helpful. In this past year, that's what we've learned. And so if we could bring that to the school board, if we're thinking about another referendum, I think a lot more people would be on board. And then I had a question about the federal funding that we'll be getting. So that funding, that is basically just for COVID purposes, correct?
Depends how flexible you want us to interpret that, but yes. It's expenses that occurred as a result of COVID. Now, learning loss happened because of COVID to a large degree, we know that. So some of our expenses could be justified by capturing some of that lost learning. So right there, it opens it up pretty widely.
Okay, because the one thing I'm thinking about too is if we're thinking about updating the HVAC systems, there's a lot of talk about fresh air going in, air going out, circulation of air, and that's conducive to keeping a healthy environment because we're in the pandemic. Maybe that would be a reason to use that money towards upgrading the HVAC systems. Just an idea. Put it out there.
That's a good idea.
certainly could be used for that. Larry Seiler had another obligation tonight, and I would love to have a scientific study of how adequate our air circulation really is. We've got a couple of Mark Lens systems in the district where 100% of our outside air is recirculated. We recirculate 100%. And I would be willing to bet that some people think some of those buildings lack circulation. And they certainly do not lack circulation. As a matter of fact, we met with an energy contractor today talking about natural gas prices and a program that we're on where we contract price with natural gas. And we talked about that topic, about how circulation, Wausau West is one of them, is very adequate. We bring in 100% fresh air, and that's the case in many of our schools. Regarding your first comment, I have a feeling we went to the community more than some people might realize prior to the referendum question. We didn't sit in the boardroom and come up with it with a dozen people. Dr. Hiltz was out in the community, but that's another maybe casualty of COVID, because when we went out after November, as much as we tried, we couldn't get people to show up in person. I think that's going to change. Right. If we go forward again, and we'll have some of those town hall type meetings, and we'll get a little bit more public engagement. I don't know if Dr. Hiltz wants to say anything now, but he and I already have talked about some of that, and going out there and doing more listening sessions, not only for referendum, just what do you want from your school district, and how can we deliver it? And those conversations will be easier when people are showing up in person and they're more engaged. Furthermore, prior to the referendum, people just naturally aren't as engaged. You point back a couple of years ago to conversations that happened, and some people just don't remember them happening because they weren't tuned in. And then a referendum question ends up on the ballot, and now everybody's paying attention and everybody's tuned in. So some of it's human nature, but we're gonna, you make a very good point, we're gonna have to do a better job of engaging the community before the question is developed, and we have some time because we have an entire year, right? And we're gonna come up with a really good question.
You know, the circulation may be good in terms of COVID, but the lack of air conditioning certainly affects learning. And it affects achievement gaps specifically because the students that we have that don't have air conditioning are the students that are most disadvantaged in our district, and generally. You know, it's not our new suburban schools on the outside that they have air conditioning or they're one level. It's the urban schools that are multiple levels that don't have air conditioning on the third floor, and it's 90 degrees. And we want these kids to catch up from what they lost. So I don't know if you can tie that in or not, but it's very learning related. It's not just comfort for students and staff. It directly impacts learning.
We actually have, we've been developing a list of what is eligible for ESSER. And we'll talk a little bit about it on April 26th, but things like that, you'd be surprised how many of them are on our list. And it's our initial list, and then we have to measure on a 10-point scale, is it eligible for ESSER, right? We have to answer that question because we're gonna have to answer that to those giving out the grant, right? And there's gonna be an accountability level back to the federal level, right? The state education department is gonna have to report to the Department of Education in Washington how they use their money. So we wanna use it for things that are consistent with ESSER. And then the other criteria or element we have to be aware of is how easy it is to stop the funding mechanism or stop the expense. How easily can we wean ourselves of some of those expenses if we start them? Some of these HVAC improvements would score a 10 because it's very easy. You fund that improvement, and then when the improvement is done, you don't need the money anymore, so you can easily wean yourself of that spending. So we're measuring those things right now. Unfortunately, we have a list that's much bigger than the funding that's available, even though the funding that is available is a pretty big sum. HVAC improvements, they usually have 6 digits for sure, sometimes 7, and those are hard to fund with grants, but we're looking into it. Anything else? Thank you. There's no action on this one, so just a report.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Bob. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the WAVE presentation, WAVE Enforce the Wausau Area Virtual Education, and Principal Seymour will provide that presentation.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me tonight. And my job this evening is to provide a succinct but pretty comprehensive kind of overview of what WAVE is. So to start, I just want to share WAVE is two separate entities. It has a K-5 component and a 6-12 component. This particular slide talks about K-12, so kind of the tenets and the foundations, the building blocks for the entire school. To start, from the beginning, WAVE was really designed to be flexible. It's designed to meet the needs of learners who want to learn outside that traditional school day. It provides 24/7 access for students to their curriculum. They have dedicated teachers who are meeting those kids where they're at. We like to think of WAVE as very individualized, personalized learning for kids. It's also very rigorous. It's a misnomer to think that a virtual school is an easy school. It certainly isn't. Our standards are very rigorous. Our teachers are pushing our kids. All students, K-12, really have to have a growth mindset because it's not just one and done. Students are turning in their work and feedback is delivered on a continuous spectrum from the instructors, and it's give and take. So a student may turn something in and it's not done. They turn it in, they get feedback, they work on it some more, and they increase their learning. There is parent involvement and family involvement that is expected on all levels. Certainly our youngest learners require more family intervention, feedback, support than our older learners, and that kind of wanes as kids get into the upper grade levels. Our most successful learners are really inquiry driven. They like to ask questions. They like to move at a pace that might be different than their peers. And this growth mindset really opens the door for them to excel in their learning. Attendance is not traditional. It's measured by minutes of engagement, by academic progress, and by communication, meetings that are scheduled between teachers, sometimes myself, RTI, and other pieces that work in a whole to measure student engagement. The personalized learning pathways are inclusive of, in our older grades, some options for added brick and mortar learning, and we'll get to that in a minute. I would say the most important part of our virtual school is that it's relationship driven. That the students that we have, we get to know very well. We've had instances this year where kids didn't know who else to call, and they were having emergencies, and they called us. They have those same, even sometimes perhaps deeper relationships because they are communicating back and forth to such a degree. We have special education services, pupil services support, and we're very anxious to adopt the Leader in Me curriculum, and we think we're in a very unique place to also add in the family component of Leader in Me. We have a tech help desk that is available for our kids, and new this year, we also have a WAVE parent network. So our K-5 curriculum is, like in 612, delivered, the core of that curriculum is delivered online. The K-5 students don't just do online work, however. They also have a lot of paper and pencil work. They have a lot of projects that they're doing. On the next slide, I don't have interactive slides like Bob did, and I don't have a laser pointer, but I do have pictures of learners coming up. So that's exciting. Actually, Cassie, I'm sorry. Thank you. The virtual piece is blended with project-based and paper and pencil learning. The parent involvement like I said earlier, with K-5 requires a little bit more commitment from parents. I want to emphasize that this is not homeschooling. This is an opportunity for parents to be more hands-on with their learners, but it's delivered by licensed teachers. Those teachers are driving the learning, they're assessing the learning, they're modifying the learning, and they're working with the students daily. The parents must, at minimum, attend weekly conferences with their classroom teachers, and this is designed to monitor what's been going on, do goal setting, to do direct teaching, and to have that relationship-driven engagement. We have additional live lessons for groups and lots of social opportunities and engagement for kids to be working together. Here is a number of visuals, because I think sometimes pictures speak louder than words, and I think this helps capture a little bit of the culture and the flair of our K-5 learning team. .612 has been in operation for a few more years than the K-5, and I do want to give a shout out. Some of our dedicated K-5 teachers up in the nosebleed section, they have done amazing work at starting from scratch and building an incredible program. Our 612 teachers are just as dedicated, and they are constantly sharing ideas of how to make things better, how to reach kids. And we have a scaffolded intervention and support. We have access to a tutor that kids can reach out to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if they can't get a hold of their teacher. Because let's face it, at 12 o'clock, at midnight, if a student is doing his or her work and has an immediate question, Mrs. Smith might not be able to answer at midnight, but the tutoring service that we provide will. We have leadership opportunities for kids. We have clubs. We have AP coursework, NCAA coursework, and as mentioned earlier, opportunities for our 612 students to be engaged in a hybrid schedule. They can take up to 2 classes at a brick and mortar school. They can participate in clubs, dances, sports, and a variety of other things. This picture captures some of our 612 learning. So as parents are evaluating their choices for fall, if WAVE is the remote option for virtual learning, which I think is good. Virtual learning is designed to be delivered remotely. Our teachers are trained in the best practices for remote delivery. Our curriculum is designed to be engaging and interactive for remote learners. We have many interventions in place to meet and support, to guide. You still have to evaluate, is this the right path for you? And I think that's the goal of the Wausau School District, that there's a path for every learner. Whether that is one of our 3 charters or a traditional brick and mortar environment, we hope to provide a pathway that suits the needs for everyone in our district. On the left-hand side, I tried to capture some of those big qualifiers that will help determine whether virtual learning is a good fit. I mentioned the growth mindset. Kids also, and this is kind of inherent in attending a virtual school, but they need to have some technical skills. A lot of things would be done via Google, email. You have to be able to navigate that online infrastructure. We do have supports to help learn that. There's a lot of reading. Kids need to be ready to read. Typically, students who do the best have some problem-solving skills. They can communicate well, and they can manage their own time. I also linked some additional resources, including a blog piece that I wrote for one of our state organizations that highlights the difference between remote learning and virtual learning. And I also linked the WAVE website. So as parents are thinking about fall, weighing their decisions, we do have some timelines that we need to talk about. In order for the district to make the best staffing decisions, to prepare, to give everyone a great opportunity to start fall, moving right ahead, we would like for parents to register at WAVE by May 14th. That would be for anyone in K-12. And those applications have already started to come in. The applications can be found on our website. We will continue looking at those applications through June 3rd, and then after that on a case-by-case scenario. WAVE is a semester-long commitment, and we do everything we can to make sure it's a successful experience, but people should know that when you are enrolling, it is for a minimum of 1 semester. And I would be happy to answer questions.
Do we still have the sign at John Muir advertising WAVE? Is that still up?
That sign was taken down, and there's a sign about everyone trying to do their best to get back into wash hands, do COVID.
Yeah, I was just thinking that you know, there may be more interest in remote learning opportunities this fall than even in other years. You know, it'd be a good time to get the word out that we have this great opportunity, not only for our own students, but for students from other districts.
If I could just react to that. We were going to change that billboard recently. It's a little bit weather dependent, but we do have a registration and kind of a high interest billboard that'll be going up there.
Good.
I don't know if the district was going to send out any kind of email communication, but maybe having just this part of the meeting in a video clip with the presentation could be helpful to families that are making a decision, because I do think there's going to be more interest in remote learning than you typically see. One question I did have was just regarding the day, and you mentioned it's not the typical attendance or hours, but can you give an example of what a day looks like? Because for students that have stayed virtual this year, they are engaging throughout the day with their classes, with their different teachers, classroom teacher, encore teachers, small groups. And so how does that contrast with WAVE? Are they just watching videos all day?
No, so great question. And ironically, we are working on a day in the life video to help families see what that looks like, what it looks like to be a WAVE student. But we do not have either a fully synchronous or a fully asynchronous environment. It's really a blend. In K-5, it is the one meeting parents have to attend no matter what is that weekly academic conference, because it's so important for evaluating, for goal setting, for all of those things, the direct teaching when a teacher is evaluating and seeing, okay, we really need to work on this element. Then at that weekly meeting, teachers can say, hey, there's a phonics lesson and you need to attend. I think you should attend. It's Tuesday at 10 o'clock. Go on our website and all of the live lessons, and this would be just a website that is available to our K-5 families because Google codes and Meet codes are on it. But it's very organized so that parents can plan their weeks. They can see when all of the K-1 live offerings are, when all of the 2-3, the 4-5, and then they can plan their week accordingly based on what their child needs, what their interests are. So there's academic live meets, and then there are clubs and social interactions and leadership time.
And are there certain subjects that aren't covered, whether it's grades K through 5 or the upper grades? I see the option to take some in-person classes for 6 through 12, but for instance, is there still art? Is there still music?
So, yep. And I don't think I fully answered your first question, so I'm going to back up just a second and also talk about what the 6-12 day looks like. because that one is a little less structured than our K-5. The 6-12 students will work to develop a schedule, and we do have intervention teachers if kids need help in developing a schedule, a day, what their day is going to look like. And they have the option then to attend office hours with their teachers, more like a college setting, where teachers will say, all right, I'm hosting office hours Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for English. Pop in, and we're going to do direct teaching on the areas that you need. Or I'm going to be giving a general overview of this unit that's coming up. Or we're going to be practicing this math thing as a group. I'm going to invite a group of kids. The teachers will also schedule one-on-ones with students. So that's another example where K-5 looks a little bit different than 6-12. Can you repeat the other part of your question?
Oh, it was written in regards to subject matter and things like art, music.
So this year, we had intended for, like K-5 was very new, and we're developing things. We do not have Encore currently with K-5, but we're working to have a partnership with GD Jones so that kids can take Encore classes in person. So if they wanted art and PE and music, they would be able to do that in person at GD Jones. Those families that may not want that, we also have club varieties of that. So we have art club. So it wouldn't be taught by an art specialist, but they're doing art activities, some yoga classes, some other things to be active. In 6-12, we have a very robust course catalog. There's everything you could possibly want, you can more or less take. Music, we have limited to music appreciation, but we have lots of kids doing community music and some students who are opting for choir at Wausau West or band at Wausau East. But we do have art and PE and everything else.
Thank you. I do have one other question. I was waiting to see if other board members did, but my other question is just in regards to student interaction with one another. I guess I'm not really fully understanding what that looks like and how that contrasts from virtual learning currently and how students are able to interact with one another at WAVE.
Okay. The K-5 student interaction, there's lots of friends that developed in our K-5 classrooms. Maybe I should have talked about a few of the pictures, but one of the pictures a mom sent me because two of the kids who hadn't known each other previous to WAVE saw each other at the park, and there they are on the spaceship, and they're like, hey, it's my classmate, and they just started playing because they see each other all the time. They're interacting, they're in live meets together, they're doing fun things together. There's lots of clubs that the kids are taking part in, and through that interaction, and even things like Officer Cornell is doing the Hope lessons right now with the 5th grade. So they're all together and they're asking questions. They see each other. They know each other. They're forming bonds. We're bringing them in right now for forward testing. And it's so cute because they're coming in and they're pointing at each other and they know each other and they want so badly to hug their teachers because they love them so much, but they're always like, oh, can't hug, but it's so good to see you. The K-5 kids have great opportunities for that, seeing each other and interacting. Our 6-12 kids are more independent. They pick and choose. So if they want to be part of an FBLA club, like our student up there who won an award, if they want to take part in book club, like the ones down on the right-hand side, they are. Otherwise, they're engaging more in discussion boards, and if they are meeting together online in teacher office hours. One thing that I hope to get back would be our physical place that we used to have at the mall. So the closing of the mall ended our opportunity to have that blended learning space, which was really nice because teachers held live office hours and kids showed up and they interacted and they studied and they did FBLA. So at some point I'm hoping that we can regain that piece.
Thank you.
I don't know if you heard, but we might have a referendum next April, so.
I did hear something. Other questions?
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for providing the presentation. It's really important for the board to be able to be more informed and for the public to be able to be informed in making that decision by the hopeful deadline of May 14th or possibly June 3rd.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are moving on to old recurring business. We're coming up on an action item. This is from the Ed Ops Committee meeting in March. This is project relaunch and reopening Wausau School District schools for 2021-2022. We went through this in the last meeting, so I'm just going to move on the motion. I'm seeking a motion to move to open Wausau School District schools in grades PK through 12 in a full in-person model 5 days per week at the start of the 2021-2022 school year.
Second.
Okay, that was a first by Lee Webster, a second by Jim Boucher. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries, 9 yes, 0 no. Okay, moving on, new business. Also from the Education Operations Committee meeting, we had a Leader in Me update. Of course, Leader in Me is the curriculum that the Wausau School District is using, and Angie Lloyd and other administrators provided a brief presentation on that. We also had the math resource for the middle schools presented, and this is an action item. So this was an update or a presentation by Dr. Rauscher and members of the mathematics specialist team. They presented their findings and their recommendation on the new middle school math resource adoption. Again, we did go through this in detail at the previous meeting as well. So I am seeking a motion to approve the purchase of iReady Classroom Mathematics as the curriculum resource for Wausau School District students in grades 6 through 8.
So moved.
So I heard here the first from Jane Roosh, a second from Beth Martin. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries, 9 yes, 0 no. Okay, next we have an item. This is going to be a roll call vote. This is the resolution authorizing and approving a master lease purchase agreement with Apple Inc. and related equipment schedule. So at the previous Education Operations Committee meeting, John Uding provided a brief presentation about the highlights and next steps of the iPad refresh for the fleet of district elementary iPads. I am seeking a motion to approve the resolution authorizing and approving a master lease purchase agreement with Apple Inc. and related equipment schedule.
So moved.
Second.
All right, that is a first from Jim Boucher and a second from Lance Trollope.
Beth Martin?
Yes.
Pat McKee?
Yes.
Jane Ruth?
Yes.
Lance Trollope?
Yes.
Lee Webster?
Yes.
Jim Boucher?
Yes.
Jeff Lee?
Yes.
Kyle Lo?
Yes.
Chris Fletcher?
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, that passed by roll call vote with a 9 yes, 0 no vote. All right, so now we are moving on to committee updates, board referrals. There are none. Moving on to open forum, board member professional growth and development report. Does the board have any professional growth and development?
I have a comment. I really appreciate being appointed to be the liaison to the CISA board, and we have an educational time each time that we meet. One of the program that was presented and highlighted last time was an excellent teaching program, which is a pathway for substitute teachers or people with a baccalaureate degree to get full licensure from the DPI. It's one of the few programs in the state. Milwaukee County has one, but CISA 9 is truly a leader. in this whole process. And they've, over the past 4 years, the number of students that have gone through the program has just increased tremendously. We went down from 30 in 2019 and 20 to 22 last year, but they're thinking that's going to pick up again substantially. It provides an opportunity for teachers here in the Wausau district and throughout the state to actually go through a 2-year program, either for substitutes or, like I said, for people with a baccalaureate degree to get a license and teach. And it was really exciting to get that presentation, and I think it's a real opportunity for our district. And I did talk to Keith a little bit about it this morning, and I think he may have a couple of other notes to add.
Yeah, we do have students that take part in it annually, and as Lee mentioned, it's anyone with a baccalaureate degree, so they wouldn't even have to be substitute teachers. I've hired a number of folks over the years, not necessarily here, who came from other industries, and their experience was very, very valuable. They had the right mindset, the growth mindset that Mrs. Seymour spoke to, and this is just a very, not just a convenient way to get a license, but it's very targeted. CISA 9 is very responsive. They know the needs, and they built this this program to meet the exact needs that teachers need to have to get hired, to be successful, and there's also ongoing support. So it's a wonderful opportunity.
Wonderful. Jane, it seems like you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out kind of an FYI for our Wausau School District community. Today starts the holiday for our Muslim community of Ramadan, and for those that are practicing Muslims in our schools, they will be fasting from before dawn until after dusk. And that means no food, no water, nothing by mouth. It's not unusual to be up past midnight for prayers, and then to get up early in the morning, as in 3:30 to 4, so that they can eat and pray before dawn. And this year, because it follows a lunar calendar, it's going to be from April 12th through May 12th. And so what I'm getting to is that, so our faculty is aware that they may have Muslim students who will be tired, hungry, and dehydrated in their classes, especially when you're talking about late afternoon.
Thank you, Jane. Other board member professional growth and development. I think I'll just share a couple of the things that I did in the last month. The virtual meetings have provided something different than typical when doing stops with students, meeting with student groups and such, in that I met with a couple of different groups this month. Franklin Family Fun Night, I was a speaker there, and then also Central Wisconsin, or what is it, the high school leadership team? Yeah, Central Wisconsin High School Leadership class, I was a guest speaker there. And for both of them, I was able to give them a virtual tour of my Ho-Chunk basket gallery. And there's a bigger message there that I was able to share, but my direct grandmother, just 2 generations back, and her parents used to sell baskets, Ho-Chunk baskets, on the side of dirt roads in the Wittenberg area to make ends meet, to survive, because they couldn't be hired in other jobs. They had to figure it out themselves. And when I moved back to Wausau after about a 20-year absence, I started seeing different baskets, and I started collecting them because they're beautiful, for one, but also because to me they signify perseverance and resilience. And so I have over 200 baskets. I redid my basement. It would be an actual basket gallery. And I was able to do a little virtual tour with students this last month. And I can't believe how excited the elementary students were over these baskets. They said they love history. They were so excited to hear about Ho-Chunk. I showed them some pictures of my relatives. And I just wanted to share that because I think that it's a message that I wouldn't have been able to share. I have gone to some of the buildings and taken about 6 or 7 baskets, But it was just a little bit different in this virtual environment to be able to do that. And it's always humbling to be asked. And when I'm asked to do that, it actually extends a blessing to me. So thank you to those entities this last month, because that was a really positive experience with those different groups. Okay, so next, if there isn't any other professional growth and development to report, we'll move to the legislative liaison report. Clerk Lowe?
Yes, I do have some updates for you all, for everyone. So this may be important for our seniors that are graduating or will be graduating in the future. So this is an article from April 9th, last week. So the University of Wisconsin System Interim President Tommy Thompson is continuing his push for a system-wide approach to online education. And the reason why he is pushing for this is to compete with out-of-state colleges spending heavily in Wisconsin to attract working adults to take courses. So working adults are the main target, but this may also affect our seniors that are graduating and going to college. So he states that such universities such as Arizona State, Western Governors, and University of Southern New Hampshire, they're big universities that are taking approximately 35 to 40% of our students away from the UW system. So yes. Another article here, the conservation voters calling for racial justice and accountability in the wake of growing anti-Asian violence. So there is a joint resolution, LRB 2576 and LRB 2572, introduced by Representative Francesca Hong and Senator Melissa Agard. So the resolution condemns violence against the Asian Pacific Islander Desi American community and calls for our leaders at all levels to commit to the United States to serving as a world leader in building more inclusive, diverse, and tolerant communities. Another article that we should take note of, so the DPI rules that the Burlington School District has not addressed racism, calls on districts to take further action. So the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction ruled Friday, April 9th, that the Burlington Area School District has not done enough to address the ongoing racial harassment and discrimination against students of color in its schools. So the DPI ordered the district to submit a written plan within 30 days detailing the steps it will take to prevent further discrimination in discipline and address the racially hostile environment that is present in our schools. So there was an appeal that was filed by the ACLU of Wisconsin on behalf of Darnisha Garbade, who is the mother of 2 Black children who both experienced frequent racial harassment from other students. So as board, we should take note of that. So the Wisconsin Technology Council, they do have a Wisconsin Youth Entrepreneurs in Science contest happening. The deadline is April 14th though, which is this Wednesday. So the contest is modeled after the successful Governor's Business Plan contest. And so the contest begins with a 250-word summary submitted through wisconsиnyes.com. So if anyone wants to find out more about that, go to wisconsиnyes.com. And then I just picked some COVID news. So Wisconsin reports almost 25% of population is fully vaccinated. Wisconsin reaches 3.5 million shots in the arm milestone, fewer than 600 new COVID cases confirmed Sunday, and this was an article published on April 9th, which was last Friday. And then even though, those are some good, that's some good news, the western counties in Wisconsin continue to fall behind the state rate. So Taylor County, Clark County, and Rusk County are counties that are falling behind the state rate. So that one. So the Wisconsin Senate Committee passes a resolution to term limits in Congress. So the Government Operations Committee of the Wisconsin Senate just passed SJR 12 for a national convention to propose term limits on Congress, which was introduced by Senator Dewey Strobel. And then this month, the Joint Finance Committee, they spent their first day hearing public comment at UW Whitewater. And a lot of the public comment that was given were, they needed updates to a lot of their buildings. And as a county board member, we hear that all the time with our local two-year school. And then as well, I did receive an email today from the Wisconsin Alliance for Excellent Schools. There will be a virtual hearing on the state budget, the only virtual hearing. So registration will begin on Monday the 19th at 10 a.m. And the virtual hearing will be held on Wednesday, April 28th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So the registration is limited to the first 200 people who register, and it will be expected to fill up fast. And then there are 2 other opportunities to testify in person, and that is April 21st, 2021 at the Hodag Dome in Rhinelander. And then the second one is Thursday, April 22nd at UW Stout in Menominee. You may also testify in writing or send a video. And so if anyone needs that information, I can give them that information here. And then the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction announced on April 9th that it is seeking public comment on a draft of an informational guidebook on dyslexia and related conditions. So there started a draft of an informational guidebook, which was developed in collaboration with co-chairs of an advisory committee. And so a draft guidebook and corresponding online feedback form can be found on the DPI's website. The form will remain open through 11:55 p.m. on May 9th. And so you can submit written comments or get information regarding academic standards through the online form. Yeah, and I think that's really important for our students with dyslexia because that's an issue that is sometimes misunderstood and overlooked. So that's all I have.
All right, great. Thank you so much for that legislative report. Superintendent commentary, Dr. Hilt, did you have any comments tonight?
Sure. This seems to be a good opportunity to, first of all, thank all the board members for the leadership in this very, very difficult time, but in particular, our outgoing board members. Dr. Lee, thank you for stepping into a difficult situation in our absence. Appreciate all your work. Beth Martin, thank you always for your compassion and your excitement that you've brought these last 6 years, 3 of which I were able to be a part of, so thank you. And of course, Tricia Zumke, thank you for your leadership. Again, in a very difficult time, thank you for taking the reins as president. So thank you, wish you all well, and certainly don't be strangers. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. So presiding officer commentary, Dr. Hilt, you always beat me to it. I wanted to thank Jeff and Beth as well. Jeff for seeing the divisiveness and plunging right in. Thank you. And yeah, same thing to Beth. I don't know if either of you wanted to say anything, but I'm just so grateful for the 2 of you as well.
It's been my honor. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I wanted, you often don't get to retire twice. But if I get to retire a 3rd time, I'll make a speech then too. So I don't want to just repeat what I said the last time. You know, a year ago, I thanked the district and commended the staff, the administration, everybody who worked so hard here. And of course, it's been a hell of a year. And everything that I said before is certainly redoubled now. That you all have pulled through maybe the hardest year ever in the history of this district, and obviously the hardest in recent memory. And you need to give yourselves credit for that, and that goes to the members of the board too. For a long time going forward, you're going to have a lot of latent tension. There's going to be a lot of things, a lot of pressures you're still going to feel maybe years from now. And for those staying on the board, take that to heart. And you know, we've seen some rough times this year, and there's going to be some very rough times next year. Integrating 3 new members to the board is not an easy task. And so I think you're going to have to commit yourselves to board development and trainings and opportunities to come to know one another outside of debating contentious issues. And so I would definitely just suggest that you take that very seriously. And thank you, Tricia. You've done probably the hardest job a board member's ever had to do. And I think the whole public needs to realize that too. And thank you for it. So thanks again. And Beth, we live right down the street. We'll be seeing each other.
Well, great. That's so wonderful. And I want to, I just want to say thank you very much. It's been a great honor to be able to serve this community. I have enjoyed working with all of you. I think that serving on school board is different from other local bodies. You know, we're in it. We care about kids. We care about teachers. We care about education. And it's just, I think, a different energy. And so thank you so much. Dr. Hiltz, thank you for everything that you do. You know, it's just an incredibly difficult year to the administration, to the teachers, to you know, everybody that makes our buildings work each and every day, and to the families that have been patient throughout this year. And I'd be remiss if I did not thank Cassie Peck, because I know I did it last year too, and I don't mean to embarrass you, but you do the job of 3 people, and you're just incredible at it, and so thank you. And I wish the next board the best of luck. There's a lot of important stuff that's still coming down and unresolved. And to your comment about not being strangers, Dr. Hiltz, I'm Ho-Chunk. We are people of the big voice. I am sure my voice will be heard at some point in some capacity. Good. And again, I just want to thank you. I've been given the great honor to sit in a seat that my direct relatives were never allowed to occupy, and that was never lost on me. So thank you so much. With that, I am seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, that's a first by Beth Martin, a second by Pat McKee. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.